Good evening. This is the study session for September 11th, 2023. It's not traditional to stand for a moment of silence during a study session, but in remembrance of 9/11, I would ask everyone in the chamber to stand and take a moment of silence in remembrance of those events. Thank you. If I may have a moment of personal privilege from the council, there's a couple of statements I want to read real quickly, if I may. Today, I offer my sincere apology for any error I made regarding recent statements regarding the opening and the closing of the health department. As your mayor, I am committed to providing accurate information to our community, and I deeply regret any confusion or concerns my previous remarks may have caused you or anyone. For that, I apologize. The information I provided did not reflect the record. Also, a council member has brought to our attention that an analogy I used during a meeting was inappropriate. No one other than this council member has brought this to my attention. I have not received any phone calls, nor have I received any emails regarding this matter. I offer my sincerest apologies to this body for any offense that I may have caused. So thank you for your time on that. With that being said, Mr. City Manager, can we start? And if the first item on the agenda, if I'm correct, is the proposed legislative agenda, and how would you like to proceed on that, sir?
Well, I'm going to ask our staff assistant in the city manager's office, John Mayfield, to make his way up to provide that presentation. And while Mr. Mayfield's making his way up, I'll just remind the council and the community that the council has asked through the unanimous adoption of your action plan that we develop a legislative agenda. So Mr. Mayfield collected the input of this body and city staff and has summarized that in such a manner that he'll present those findings tonight, and then following that, staff would seek direction about adding a resolution to an upcoming agenda so that we could consider formal adoption of a legislative agenda and start working with our legislative delegation in advance of the 2024 session.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayfield, please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. John Mayfield, Staff Assistant, City Manager's Office, as the City Manager said. He said about 2/3 of the things I was already going to say, so this will make this really fast for all of you tonight, so I'm sure you appreciate that. But yes, I am here to present a proposed 2024 state legislative agenda. It's not an exhaustive list, but I did take notes that were taken from council strategic meetings, discussions with the City Manager's Office, department directors, and prior activity in the General Assembly, because sometimes prior activity kind of tells you where things are going in the future. A couple of dates I want to mention, kind of key dates. Friday, December 1st is the first day that legislators can pre-file bills, and that kind of also gives you kind of a sense of what may be on the horizon. The opening date is January the 3rd, and the last date that the Missouri General Assembly can consider legislation is Friday, May 17th, 2024. As many of you have known, having gone through the process at least a couple of times now, bills that are pre-filed or filed early in the session have the best chance of passing and becoming law. As the city manager said, we're here to receive direction, and we plan on bringing a resolution forward to you at a later date prior to December 1st for an adoption of this legislative agenda. This is the first time I've ever had this on the overhead, so this will be challenging because my kid's nickname for me is Caveman for my wonderful adaptation to technology, so wish us all the best tonight. I'll just go through these in order, then I'll come back to each one kind of briefly, kind of hit some highlights. First, the city opposes any changes to economic development tools, such as community improvement districts, CID, that would hamper development and redevelopment. Secondly, the city opposes any reductions, caps, or altering of the sales tax rate. Third, this one's kind of I put a lot of bureaucratic speak into this one, so I'll clean it up a little bit when we get closer to it. But the city opposes any legislation that takes away the right of cities to manage public rights of way in regard to pole attachments or to charge fees to telecommunication video service providers that use the public right of way. Fourth, the city supports increased funding for mental health services and independence in Eastern Jackson County. And fifth, the city supports funding support for city tourism assets, including enhancements to the historic preservation tax credit. I'll go through each one of these. If you happen to have questions or if you want to wait to the end, either way is fine with me, whichever is the prerogative of the council. First, we oppose any changes to economic development tools. There have been many bills filed in the last several years that would really change how community improvement districts are done. They've also had a little bit of a focus on the transportation development districts. One of these major changes is to call for an election in the entire city to establish a community improvement district. And I know you've had several election dates you've had to vote on the last few years. I think you kind of understand the cost of a local election depending on what's on the ballot and other issues that are out there. Other changes would include a supermajority or a unanimous vote of the local governing body to establish a CID or a TDD. And another proposed change that we've seen a lot in the last couple of years would exempt school districts or other governmental entities from contributing to a tax increment financing fund. So you can see that this would really hurt redevelopment and development in our city and across the state. These bills have gotten legs, and you can frame things almost anything. I think it was Mark Twain who said there's three kinds of lies. Lies, excuse the language, Harry Truman would appreciate, damn lies, and statistics. So you can swing things a lot of ways. We've had a lot of success with community improvement districts and independence, and I'd hate to see that taken away. Secondly, I know this may not always be so popular. The city opposes reductions, caps, altering of the local sales tax rate. We really need a steady revenue supply, so to speak. And when you begin altering or tinkering with the sales tax rate, I mean, I know it's, as the city manager could probably tell you better than I can, doing the budget is a very difficult and challenging task, and having that, not just because of economic forces, but because of political forces, moving that as well. And I know there have been studies done that basically this would save the average person a couple of pennies at best. So we would get hurt. We'd also be hurt not being able to provide the services that our community has come to expect and desire of us. So when those funds get kind of slowly eroded, not a lot of places we're allowed to make that up, unfortunately. Third, the city opposes any legislation that takes away the right of cities to manage public rights of way in regard to pole attachments or to charge fees to telecommunication and video service providers that use the public right of way. That's kind of a garbled way of saying we want to protect our interest in the right of way, basically. About 5 years ago, we came to an agreement with the cell phone companies regarding attachments. That's still in place, but now there's a new phenomenon with the video service providers not necessarily wanting to pay for using the public right of way, which we have to maintain that. We have to make sure they're doing things the right way. There's a cost to that. There's currently a lawsuit, I believe, in St. Louis County Circuit Court that's been bouncing around the courts in different spheres for about 5 years between City of Crevcore, I love saying City of Crevcore, I don't know why, City of Crevcore and Netflix and Hulu. It started as one of those basic arguments, well, you have to do that. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. And ended up in court, and it's been there for 5 years. Last session, multiple bills were filed to basically, yes, sir.
If you don't mind, could you give us a little bit of background on the Netflix, the city's kind of arguments, so that in
Sure.
plain English, so that when
Well, I'm a bureaucrat. I'm not sure I speak in plain English anymore, but I will do my best. Basically, when you have a right-of-way, it has to be mowed. It has to have a lot of different things done to it.
Sure.
And so basically, it's similar to the cable franchise fee. We charge a fee, kind of like with the cable companies back in the early 80s when they were the new phenomenon. Cities and counties kind of went to them and they said, hey, you're using basically our property for your profit. And we have to do things to make sure you're doing things the right way. So they agreed at that time to pay a 5% fee of their bill to cities to kind of offset the cost of having to maintain the right of way and making sure that they were upkeeping and everything was going just fine. This is pretty similar, only it's the video service providers now that are balking and paying that same fee, basically, that the cable companies initially agreed to, and it's been in, I think, state statute since the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there. And so basically, they don't want to have to pay that fee. So and as you know, the streaming services are very popular. It's a very competitive business, cable and all the other ways that people get their entertainment and so forth nowadays. So I hope that kind of along the lines of what you're looking for, Mayor.
No, that is perfect, because for those folks who may be watching and those folks that are not familiar with the details of the cable fee process, and they're watching, I was just thinking about them. We know, the city manager is very, very familiar with it.
Yes.
But for those folks watching, so just wanted to I was asking for them if that's okay.
Oh, sure, absolutely, Mayor.
So thank
as
you.
you might remember,
that was extremely well done, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
a couple of years ago, because the cable companies kept coming to the table with very powerful people with them, a deal was struck to kind of gradually reduce the cable franchise fee. There was also supposed to be a task force created to kind of study these issues and to find a way maybe we could find common ground. And I know, Mayor, you and I both served in Jefferson City for a time. You've heard of a lot of task force over the years. Some get off the ground and meet, and some don't. Well, this is one that didn't meet. So we're a little concerned because, they really haven't yet lived up to their end of the bargain by having these task force meet and issue reports and things of that nature, so we can kind of take a look and see where we might be in agreement with them and where we might not be in agreement with them and try to forge some common ground. But that task force has not yet been selected or met. So there have been some watchers who are like, well, wait a minute, you can't really ask to have anything change when you haven't lived up to your end of the bargain, so to speak. So that's a lot of the background behind that.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. And I appreciate your taking the time to answer my question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Fourth, I don't know, this one probably needs a lot of discussion. The city supports increased funding for mental health services and independence in Eastern Jackson County. I believe in April of this year, the health assessment for the community was presented to you. And very sad news, actually. Independence has a higher suicide rate than Eastern Jackson County, Kansas City, the state of Missouri, or the United States in 2020. Our residents said mental health was one of their top health concerns in this community. So I put that in because of the notes that I had from your meetings, also from the health assessment that we gleaned from the public. And just, I think that covers a multitude of realms having increased funding in mental health. And last, the city supports funding support for city tourism assets, including enhancements to the historic preservation tax credit. We have a thriving tourism industry. Studies have shown that for every dollar of tax credit issued, there's been approximately $4 of reinvestment. There's a 25% tax credit on restoring certain historical homes and structures. There's also a 20% federal tax credit, that same thing. And this past year, Senator Steve Roberts introduced a bill that would increase the state tax credit from 25% to 35%. And those tax credits would do a wonder for our community, for our tourism sites, and they can be in residential areas, so that would be a big help. Finally, this is just for your consideration, just kind of letting you know more than anything else. And this is ARPA funding, and it's kind of like a big onion, only it's the federal government, so it's an onion, it's the mega onion of onions, lots of layers. But the state of Missouri received $2.8 billion in the American Rescue Plan Act from what's called, it's an acronym, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, SOFRF. When you're in government, you have to have an acronym for everything, apparently. So the state of Missouri received $2.8 billion of that funding. According to the state's ARPA website as of this afternoon, approximately $2.5 billion of that money has not yet been spent or put out, into the public sector. They have been appropriated to different state departments or programs or funding, but they've not yet been spent. So just wanted to let you know of that detail. I get asked this a lot. A government consultant, or I know it's a bad word, lobbyist, might possibly be able to help assist us in navigating state government and state agencies that have these funds in pursuit of those funds and also some other potentially available funds. Like I said, it is a big onion. I mean, you have to really dig deep to really get a lot of information about ARPA. So I know that we're a member of Missouri Municipal League, and they do a good job. I would say that they advocate for the whole of their membership and not any one particular city or entity in particular. They have a wide array of interest and within their membership, and they do a good job, but they represent the whole. They don't represent a particular city or group of cities or a county, so that's kind of why I'm throwing that out there. But that is all I have. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions from the body? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John. I would maybe bring out the discussion of, as we're going through the legislative agenda and moving forward, that remind the council that we do not have a active lobbyist who is representing us in Jeff City for our interest and protect our interest and help bring some of this ARPA funding as we move through this onion. So I would submit to the body that perhaps we should start looking at that, get one hired, get an RFQ moving forward, and get going on this sooner than later.
I agree. And I think Mr. City, if I may interject here, and Mr. Mayfield, stay for any other questions, please. But Mr. Walker, I believe you're already working on that, if I'm correct, is in the process of doing an RFQ for that.
Sorry to cut you
Please
off.
forgive me. It was my fault.
We've had some conversations individually with members, but that was one of the things we did want to get formal direction on tonight, was just to make sure that as a body, the body was comfortable providing that direction so we didn't overstep your bounds.
So I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that's exactly the approach I would like to go, and I'm glad that you brought that up, and see what the other members of the body think. Please proceed.
Mayor, yeah, same comment, and that is specifically relative to the ARPA funding. I think that anything we can do to try to acquire more of those funds through lobbyists or those that are more closely tied to that is the right approach to take. One other question for Mr. Mayfield, and that is, we sent out, or you sent out I don't think maybe it wasn't you, maybe the city manager, sent out a request for information from the council relative to legislative items that we wanted to make sure were addressed. Was there anything else that came up that really kind of didn't make your list, or I'm just kind of curious?
Well, there were a couple of different things. The main one was affordable housing. The reason why I didn't really include that in this is a state legislative agenda. Most of our funding for that comes from the federal government, and they're based on formulas. I had a conversation once with Congressman Cleaver, and it was really enlightening. He said that there are some government agencies and programs that are using funding formulas that were based on 1934. So I think a few things have changed since 1934. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we didn't include the it's also in the MML kind of policy a little bit more fleshed out. I'm not really familiar with any other cities that really have that in their state legislative agenda, mainly because it's more geared toward the federal government. That was one of the big things I had seen in a couple of different places that folks had mentioned things about affordable housing, and I do concur that that is a need. I would say I noticed an article in the Kansas City Star a few weeks ago that actually said that Independence is not exactly rent-wise an expensive city, but when you put in, for anybody in any community, when you add in utilities, car insurance, these other things that you have to have in life, things start to build. I think it said our average was toward the lower, I can get the article for you, but kind of toward the lower medium part of rent in the greater Kansas City area, but car insurance hurts some people, utilities, happen to have a cell phone, other things, things add up. And those are kind of the reasons why I didn't put affordable housing in, but it was mentioned a couple of different times apparently.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm comfortable with the priorities that you've outlined, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
And I also read that article, and I agree with you. It said Independence was one of the more affordable cities in the entire metro area. So that was the essence of it, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That was excellent. Any other questions?
Mayor.
Please proceed.
Mr. City Manager,
Sir.
if you may, the franchise fee was discussed briefly, and I think Mr. Mayfield mentioned that it's now on some sort of declining sliding scale. You know, Google's coming to town, and I think they mentioned that they provide 1% of their revenue back to the city. Seems to me that that might be helpful in maybe replacing some of that revenue lost in the franchise fee.
It can help. It certainly obviously won't hurt. The challenge that we face is twofold. One is we are on that sliding scale to take that to a 50% reduction, so from 5 down to 2.5%. And then the longer term challenge, which probably is not all that long term in reality, is that as more and more consumers opt to move away from traditional cable service and more for the streaming service, we could see additional lost revenue just from lack of consumer payment. The deal, the arrangement that was struck in Jefferson City was that in exchange for support of what's commonly known as the Wayfair legislation, so allowing us to collect our use tax on all internet sales, regardless of the point of origin, that legislation was approved commensurate with this sliding scale. So we can anticipate additional revenue growth from that change, but until that's fully implemented, I can't tell the council with any definitive confidence what that ultimate amount will look like until that dust settles. But just for historical purposes, that was the deal that was cut in Jefferson City. But long term, I do remain concerned as we see more and more people move away from phone, landlines, and cable service. That revenue is probably a very quick to die source for us.
Sure. As far as Google goes, though, that's totally separate from that issue.
That is totally separate and will be a new revenue source for the city.
Right, which certainly isn't a bad thing, right?
Not at all. That's like I said, not a bad deal for us at all. That's a win and a new revenue stream for the city.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else, other questions? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Sir.
We've been discussing lately about the right-of-ways regarding infrastructure that is there and having the utilities maintain that to a good working, aesthetically pleasing order. I know we're looking at that internally, and maybe this is a question for you too, Mr. Mayfield. Is there any way to put some teeth in, try to get that with Jeff City? Surely we're not the only municipality that has utility boxes and different right-of-way structures that are in disrepair and unsightly.
We are certainly not the only municipality with interests in right-of-way. And as a reminder for everybody, we view it as a privilege to operate in city right-of-way. There are costs associated with maintaining those assets in the right-of-way, and therefore that's the basis for the fee schedule that's been set up. We are in a defensive mode when it comes to right-of-way, more about maintaining the authority we've got. I would love to see more teeth in there to enforce a more appropriate maintenance of those assets within the right-of-way. But right now, all the different utility stakeholders are pressing for less and less city authority, less regulation, less fees for operating within the right-of-way. And we are unified with our peers across the state to try to preserve the authority we've got, which is obviously our first priority. But I would, just to be, completely transparent with the council, I think you face an uphill battle to try to add any teeth right now when we're in a defensive position right now.
So were you suggesting we continue looking internally how we manage that then?
I think our best bet right now is to try to maximize our authority both through our code of ordinances and then the staff enforcement and our being as aggressive and proactive as we can in enforcing that issue. I think that's where we're going to see more luck than in battling the utility industry in Jefferson City.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And Mr. Perkins, Councilmember Perkins, you brought up two great points. One is the funding for ARPA, and then also, now we had a discussion about that earlier today. And then, so I know there's a deadline with Jackson County that's coming up. What do you need from us, Mr. City Manager, in order to make sure that we meet that deadline to meet the request for Jackson County?
We've gotten that. You guys have provided clear direction about priorities, and we've not only submitted priorities internally as a city, but there's a couple outside agencies that where our interests align, and we are collaborating together to put the applications forward for that as well. So we're throwing a lot at the county, and rightfully so. We hope to and expect to be competitive in that process, which, for everybody's information, closes this Friday.
So, and that's exactly why I was asking. So I knew you were prepared for it, but I just want to kind of give people a heads up.
Glad
so,
you did.
Thank you. And thank you for that. If I could, Councilmember, is how would you like us, we're going to do the RFQ. Are there any other concerns you might have on proceeding with that process, or a time frame for that process from your perspective?
For the lobbyists?
Right. Because you've been through this before, you've been through the process. I kind of want to get your thoughts.
I would say start now and get that RFQ out there.
Okay.
Start working through that.
And then and be ready to go. Just as Mr. Mayfield said, they pre-file on December 1, is that correct?
Yes.
And so with December 1st being the deadline for that, then hopefully have somebody pretty close to that date so that we in fact can protect our interest on these priorities and get us going forward. So, and I think, from our discussions earlier, Mr. City Manager, you feel pretty confident that we can, at least by the end of the year, have a lobbyist on board.
I think we get the direction, which was clear tonight. We, as staff, kind of have our template from past years when we went through this process. So we'll work with Mr. Mayfield to make certain that that's current and meets expectations. If there's anything that needs to be cleaned up about that, or to streamline or simplify it in any way, I think we can present the council with final recommendations and have that process wrapped up to be ready to roll with the filing deadline that's fast approaching.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
I'd make a request along those lines. I'm absolutely in favor of the city pursuing a lobbyist contract again. The process, I would request, be as transparent as possible, and the full council be as involved as possible in the selection, in the final selection, so that we should have as many candidates to select from as possible. Now, if there's 10 or 15 or something, then no, that's probably a little much for us. But if there's 3 or 4, then we probably should take a look at all of them. That would be my suggestion.
Well, it would be my recommendation that yes, the council be involved in that one, this is largely a matter of policy. You all taking positions on these policy matters, so that's your role, and you need to be comfortable with who you're using to advocate for your positions. And number 2, this is really about a group of elected officials advocating to your peers in Jefferson City. So again, that peer-to-peer relationship, who you're using to communicate that message, you need to be confident in that relationship as well. So I wouldn't just agree with that. I would recommend that the council play a role in that ultimate decision.
Anything else, Councilmember?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No.
And I was just, I think you bring up a great point. Should we kind of give the city manager direction to, if we do get more than 7 or 8 or 9, to narrow it down to 3 or 4 and make that as a recommendation for the final selection from the staff? Would that be?
Yeah, I think that's probably fine.
Mr. City Manager, are you comfortable with that process?
I am. Mr. Mayfield, help me out here. The last time we really did a full-blown one of these, how many did we get? Was that in the 4 to 5 range?
I think it was like 5 or 6.
Yeah. So we can work. I don't anticipate, more than that. But if for some reason we can work to bring you a manageable portfolio of candidates, and then you can help us make that determination from there.
Okay. Anyone else? Other questions, comments? Mr. Mayfield, I thought you did an excellent job. Thank you very much for your time in preparation for this. And if I'm hearing you correctly, if I can just go through the list in my mind again so we're all on the same page. Obviously, the attacks on the CIDs and that process, the sales tax rate, they're attacking that, which would make a huge impact for us because that's a significant portion of our revenue, if not the most major portion. Poll attachments and video services, that's been an ongoing concern, as you well know. Mental health, I think that's excellent on your behalf to do that and recommend that. Tax credits for tourism was excellent, and the ARPA recommendations there was very good, and your final point on Lobbyist was well done. I think I covered all the points that I was just kind of summarizing for you, so please forgive me for doing that.
You did better than I did, Mayor, so thank you.
Okay. No, well done. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Mayfield? Thank you. Okay. This takes us to other discussion questions here on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
before we do that, I just want to, since it's not on the agenda, I just want to ensure that we're going to allow since we have council member sponsored items, I just want to ensure we're going to allow input from the audience on this
Okay.
under the new rule change.
Okay. Have we defined that or clarified that yet from your perspective on the rules change?
Well, I mean, we voted on it, and there are council member sponsored items, and I believe there may be members of the audience that may want to speak on one of two of them. I'm not really sure. I just want to make sure that it's allowed if they came here to speak on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
yeah, this rule change, and I think this was the rule change you proposed was 6.4, is in conflict with rule change 3.4. Is that correct, 3.4?
Yeah, city attorney's got the rules pulled up in 3.4 of the rules of procedure,
Yeah.
speak to study sessions.
So, I was not a fan of this rule change. I voted against it. Many in the chamber were not for it, but it was a rule change nonetheless, and I've followed the rule as requested. But in the rule, it says that public comment will be allowed on any council-requested action items that appear on a study session agenda, with the same rules as a regular meeting. Many of these folks came tonight with the anticipation of being able to speak regarding their support or not support of these agenda items, and I think that we need to pause and allow them to sign up, or you can just let them come up and speak regarding any of the particular discussion topics. So if we're going to follow this rule, that's what I'm suggesting and hoping we will do.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
before we get to that part of the discussion, I'm looking at the agenda that was posted according to our rules. I downloaded it on September 5th. It has no council member requested items on it. And so I'm not sure what we're even talking about.
We're talking about the agenda tonight.
I'm looking at it, tonight's agenda. I downloaded it September the 5th. The only item on there is 2024 proposed state legislative agenda. It's the only item on that agenda.
Here you go. You'd like to look at it, I'd be happy to share it with you.
Well, but was that the agenda that was posted?
Address it to the city manager.
On the
Ask
date
him.
that it was, the date that was supposed to be posted?
Address it to the city manager. Ask him if it was in compliance.
I'd make that request. I mean, we've passed the rules. We need to follow the rules that we passed.
Mr. Langford, what's your interpretation of this, if I may ask?
My interpretation of Rule 6.4 or 3.4 or...
Well, you choose the order and proceed.
My understanding is under 6.4 that there's a time factor in terms of when something can be added to the agenda, and that the items that have shown up on the, I'll call it the second version of the agenda, because that's how I received them. I received one, then I received another.
Okay.
The items that showed up in the second version were not added in a timely manner and therefore should not be up for discussion tonight.
And
As
what do you
far as-
mean by added by a timely manner? For the sake of everyone
Well,
here,
I can read this, okay.
please do.
Section 6.4 states in part that all council requested action items must be submitted to the city manager or city clerk on or before 9 a.m. 2 Thursdays prior to the study session regular meeting for which the agenda is being published. I don't know when the items were added. I wasn't privy to that, but I have been given information that they weren't added according to this deadline pursuant to this rule.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I could be wrong, and that's why I'm asking for clarification, but according to rule, again, it's 6.4, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So Rule 6.4 says it has to be submitted 12 days in advance in order to be considered on the agenda.
That'd be correct.
When was
Okay.
that rule passed?
I'm sorry.
I'd have to look
When
that
was
up. I
that
don't know
rule passed?
immediately.
Yeah. If you don't mind, they'll take a moment to look that up. Thank you.
Well, I can make it real easy for you. It was last Tuesday.
The new rules of procedure were adopted at the August 21st meeting.
And is there any time limit for city council rules to be put into place? I mean, if as soon as they're passed, they become effective, if I'm correct. Would that be correct, Mr. Langsford?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So they would be effective on August 21st.
I believe so, yes.
So on August 22nd at 8 a.m., we would be following those policies as a body.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
so I really have no idea how these things got on here or why. What I do know is they're on here now. And I think in good faith, we have people here that want to talk about them. I think in good faith, we need to give them that opportunity.
So what you're saying is, from a good faith perspective, those people who have come here tonight want to talk, that they could talk about these items.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's not our fault that they got on there mistakenly. I mean, I don't know the reasoning they're there. I have no idea. I don't know the backstory. I just know that they're on there. And
Right.
there are people there that want to talk about it. So, I mean, let's let them do it.
I have a question too. State law says the agenda must be posted 24 hours in advance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Was it posted 24 hours in advance of the meeting?
I'd have to defer.
It was. I mean, I can answer that question.
Okay, so state law trumps this. And so are we going to proceed or are you going to shut the meeting down tonight? And we're not having any of these actions? Because I followed this rule, and I'm the one that opposed this rule. And I followed the rule as it's stated.
Then
State
how,
law says
what's
that
your,
we can, and
what's your
sunshine law-
interpretation, Mr. Councilmember, if I may ask? So
Pardon me?
you stated the rule. Can you read the rule that you're following?
Yeah. It says that all council requested items must first be presented at a study session. That's
Right.
what we're at tonight.
That's right.
Prior to being added to a regular meeting. Now, you're supposed to put in any resolution 12 days in advance of a council meeting, correct?
That's not the interpretation that we have. The interpretation.
No, of a council meeting, not of a study session, council meeting. That's been the rule, standing rule was changed, and that's what we've done, so that there was no more Friday surprises. The fact is, I brought this resolution, or these issues to the city manager 2 weeks ago. He was out with COVID the week prior and wasn't able to work on them. I have emails to prove it. So, I didn't vote for this rule, but I'm in compliance. I'm asking you to be in compliance of your own sponsored rule tonight.
But read
State
the rest-
law allows for, it says the agenda must be posted 24 hours in advance. This was posted in accordance with state law. State law trumps these rules, and we should go forward with it. If you're not prepared to go forward with it, then let's end the study session tonight.
What's the pleasure of the body?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
so you read part of of section 6.4, but the other part states that council requested items that appear on a study session agenda with the same rules as a regular meeting. All council requested action items must be submitted to the city manager or city clerk on or before 9 a.m. 2 Thursdays prior to the study session or regular meeting for which an agenda is being published. I'm assuming that they were not presented to either the city manager or city clerk
Your
to meet
presumption is wrong.
that deadline because they didn't show up on the agenda that I downloaded on September 5th.
Your presumption is wrong. And if the city manager would like to address that, he can verify whether I had discussions with him on this through email. He was out sick with COVID, and it was an issue that when he got back and we met, I asked him to make sure that it was posted on this agenda. So again, if you're going to take it up with anyone, take it up with Sunshine Law. That's what it says. If you don't want to be in compliance with that, just make it stated, make it known tonight in the session, and let's move on. You have people here that came, they listened, they paid attention, and now you're going to change the rules. Is it because you don't want to abide by your rules, or you just have a problem with me?
I don't think this is personal at all, sir. We've all made the rules together. So,
I voted against the rules, but I'm in compliance with your rules, sir.
Uh,
So it's quite simple. Either we move forward with these agenda items or you don't. And that's really where we're at.
let me defer to the body. Do they want to enforce
It's
the
your
rules tonight?
rule. You sponsored it. You make the decision.
What's your recommendation, Mr. Langford, from the rules standpoint? If we follow the rules or don't follow the rules?
Sir, I've given you my interpretation. Ultimately, this is up to the city council to decide.
Right. But in my opinion, we've decided. And I'm happy to do this. In compliance with folks that have come tonight to talk, I am happy to do that. But, and to allow them to speak on these items. But from my perspective, and I am doing that as a courtesy to you, council member, but then this item will in fact not show up in the next council meeting, but it'll show up after that because it has to have 12 days to be on that council agenda, is my interpretation.
That's not what the rule says. If it comes tonight and we go through this, then it'll show up on the next council agenda. That's what the rule says.
Right, and it also says, the rules say 12 days in advance to be put forward.
Okay. So, again, I submitted it. Take it up. Ask the question, Mr. Mayor, to the city manager. Did I not bring this forward?
I
in the
don't know,
time?
sir.
I'm telling you I did. If Mr. Walker would like to confirm that, I have an email that says that, okay? I've had discussions with him already on this. So, out of courtesy to him, who was out with COVID, he did what he could do, but I gave him the time.
Okay.
So I have no reason to mislead you on it. Make the decision and just let's move on.
What's the flavor of the body?
I'm okay with proceeding.
Okay, you proceed. How about you, Mr. Stewart? Okay. Mr. Hobart, how about you? Okay, if you're fine with proceeding, we'll proceed. And the next item on the agenda, but I'm going to put a statement here. This will never, excuse me. In my opinion, this was not appropriately put on the agenda. It needs to be put 12 days in advance. Those are the rules of this body. However, as deference to the folks here that came to speak, this body is willing to defer those rules and to suspend those rules to accommodate folks who wanted to come here and talk. If you're a citizen, you need to be heard. However, I will make it very clear to this body, in the future, we will not allow something to be added on a Friday before a study session in order to do this. Is everybody fair with that interpretation? Mr. Stewart, are you fair with that interpretation?
Why me? No.
I just started from your side. I'm not, if you want to defer to someone else, you certainly may.
No, I mean, I think we should follow the rules as they are. However, in this instance, like I said, they somehow got on here. In the good faith effort, I think we need to go ahead and go through with them. I mean, it was posted legally within the state statute.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think this is really the time to try to pin us down on.
Okay, I was just trying to.
No, I understand.
It's a body,
Look,
sir.
No. I understand. We're all in quite the conundrum, right? It's not fair to tell Councilmember Steinmeier that he didn't have the record and the history that he's got.
Okay.
And it's also not fair to say the rules are what they are. If we've agreed generally that we're going to proceed, let's do that.
Okay.
Point
well taken.
I think that's probably fair for now.
Okay.
If you do.
Yeah, but I think from my perspective in the future, I would rule that if they are not put on 12 days in advance, they can't be discussed.
If you want to rule that way now, you do have that prerogative.
I certainly do, but in deference to the folks who have come tonight, I certainly want to be respectful to them and allow them to have the opportunity to share their opinions on items. So
Then let's do
with that being said, absolutely, I agree with you, my friend. We will proceed. With that,
Mayor, there is one thing I'd like to add.
sure.
Regarding the public comments, I don't believe we've ever had public comments at a study session, and there is nothing in Rule 3.4 that allows for public comments to be placed on the agenda.
Okay. So
that's something that the city needs to be aware of as we proceed.
okay. So you're saying that we're going way out of bounds if we allow public comments.
That's not the legal phrase I would use, but it's not supported by Rule 3.4.
But it is supported by Rule 6.4, the new rule change. That's why they showed up tonight.
Okay.
Again, it's a contradiction in the two sections. I'm giving you our interpretation.
Okay.
The council, again, can proceed as the council is going to proceed.
So,
Yeah.
Mayor, if
Yes,
I
sir.
may,
Please.
the conundrum is we have rules in conflict with each other. Rather than addressing me or the conflict with this and the timing, we should be taking up and you should be making note that we need to discuss the rules that are in conflict with one another, which I voiced my opinion on when we voted on this, that we needed to fix the rules to make sure there was no conflict in other rules before we made this change to 6.4. I made that comment. Now, first session, and here we are, we're in the conflict. Talk about vetting, talk about discussing, talk about research, and we didn't do that. You have a conflict. Rather than focusing on the fact that it's timing, why don't we focus on fixing the rules so that we don't have issues down the road that conflict with this new rule? That's where we need to go. So my suggestion is that as we move forward tonight, we allow the people to speak, but then we address the issues of the rule conflicts, and we'll take it one at a time. But they need to be addressed and they need to be fixed, but now's not the time to do it. We already have this rule, and everybody's here
That's a great
in
point.
compliance.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask to suspend the rules of the study session. And Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And Madam City Clerk, please call the roll and just those members in favor of suspending the rules to allow members to talk tonight. That way we're not in the conundrum that you're talking about, Mr. Councilmember. And so,
Steinmeier.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, for this, we've got to vote because we've got to suspend the rules. It's a question of suspending the rules. So with that, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Fears,
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
McCandless. Steinmeier.
Yes.
Hobart.
Yes.
Mayor Rowland.
Yes. Since we have no rules on this, if, Mr. Steinmeier, you brought all of these forward, would it be okay to do this, to have people come and talk about the item first, and then have the council discussion after that item, and then proceed in that same manner? Councilmember folks' comments, and then proceed to the next item. Would that be fine?
It's your meeting, you run it, however you see fit. I'm okay with it. I just want them to be heard.
Absolutely. And that's what the council has all voted for, and we're in favor of that. Thank you, sir. Okay. The first item is Councilmember Steinmeier's request a resolution regarding the emergency powers of the mayor. Anyone here to speak in favor or in opposition to that?
Mike Huff, 16501 East George Franklin. I'm against this power of the emergency power of the mayor. When I was on the council, I was one that pushed back on it the first time. It doesn't come up very often, but I was against that. I think that the full body of the council should be voting on everything. And now at this point in gesture, we're seeing person trying to control clapping, which is against my constitutional right, and I'd hate to think that this person had this much power to run this city. I believe that the city council should all be voting on it. I don't know if any of you read this actual thing here, the emergency power of the mayor. It's gets pretty wound up here, and the state laws have changed a bunch. I just think while we're changing all the rules, maybe we ought to look in this rule. Number one on here that's really bothering is that mayor decides whether you can buy milk, pop, anything non-intoxicating things, ammunition, weapons. I don't know if that's a big deal, but one of the really disturbing is gasoline. People buy generators when lights go out. This gives the mayor the power to say you can't put gasoline only in your car. You can't put it in a tank. You might need a chainsaw to clear your property. You don't know when these emergencies are going to hit. There's just a lot of stuff in here that I wish that the council as a whole would look at this and review it, and probably needs to be updated. But while we're making all the rules changes, I think it'd be a good time to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, since we haven't established rules on this, if I could, everyone keep their comments to 5 minutes, please. And that's how we have the rules before, so I'll just go off of those. So, thank you. Anyone else to come to comment on this particular item? Please proceed. And please state your name and your address, please.
Mike Talca at 1901 South Lake Drive. I think when we're talking about emergency powers, I think the one thing that I can say is that the Constitution is absolute. There is no trumping the Constitution. And when we're shutting down churches, when we're shutting down small businesses, deciding what's essential, what's not essential, you just got to be really careful with that. So I'm not going to bloviate on and on, but I think everybody just needs to keep in mind the Constitution is absolute, period. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Talcott. Anyone here would speak in favor or opposition to this idea? Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Please proceed.
Just a question. All the cover sheet says is Councilmember Steinmeier requested a resolution regarding mayor's emergency powers. I don't know what he's requesting a resolution for or to do. It doesn't say anything about that. I'm just trying to understand what we're even, I mean, I understand emergency powers. I've read the charter, what it says, but I don't know what is being asked. So I think maybe a statement by Councilmember Steinmeier before we do these items would be helpful, since he proposed those.
Sure, be happy to address that. You're always welcome to call beforehand if you need to ask those questions.
Well, it wasn't on the agenda that I downloaded, so I didn't even know we were talking about it.
It's been on the agenda that I've had, so it's okay. The emergency powers listed in the charter is different than the one that we're addressing here, the one that Councilmember former Councilmember Huff addressed, these are issues that we went through, and I've had some discussions with former Mayor Weir on the things that the issues that she was looking at having to address. You know, it's no mistake that when these were designed, it was really for natural disasters. It was for any case of national emergencies. These are the kind of issues that were being thought about at the time. We didn't have the foresight to predict a pandemic and biological warfare or anything like that. And so we had to go through some very tumultuous times, and she carried the weight of being a decision maker. She could have elected to do it by herself, but she chose not to. And she did allow council to give input and to speak about these things, and we tried to share that burden with her. But there are things that I talked to her about that were of concern. The first one being, of course, I agree with Mr. Talcott, the constitutionality. If you haven't read this, I'd encourage you to get a copy of it. It's section 11.12.04. In fact, I'll hand them down to you, and you can read them yourselves. But anytime it talks about suspending the sale of ammunition or providing ammunition to someone, firearms, I'm not sure that meets the constitutional muster. It even goes as far as saying to ban or to not allow intoxicating liquor in the city. That might not be a good thing for a lot of people in this city. So that's something that I was challenged by. I'm asking for this to be updated, as well as the state statutes that were changed back in, I think it was, Mr. City Manager, was it 21 or 22?
I believe this was the 2021 legislative session, sir.
Yeah, so, and so they put some safeguards on any type of appearance or actual government overreach, and that's an important element too. So I'm asking that a resolution be put on to address some of the constitutional issues that are in the existing ordinance, but also to align itself with state statute, which I think you would be all in favor of. So that's really what we're working on and I'm looking for your input. That's what these study sessions are supposed to provide. So that's my focus. My question now is, what is your focus?
And who is that question addressed to? I'm asking.
Well, I guess Councilmember Fears, since he asked that question to me. But it's really to all of my colleagues. Do we want it to be in alignment? Do we want to update it? Do we want it to be in alignment with state statute? Do we want to look at some of the items that are part of that and make sure that the council's involved in leadership of a city? If we have another emergency like this, do you want that weight to fall on one person? Is that even fair? Or should it be shared as an elected body?
I think those are great questions, and so your question basically is, let's have a resolution saying that the body is in favor of reviewing these policies, is basically your request.
Or we can come up with some of course the state statute is the first one that needs to be addressed. There needs to be compliance with state statute. And then we need to address the issue. Do we want the issue of firearms and ammunition? Do we want the issue of gasoline? If we have a national or a regional disaster and we have to declare a state of emergency, we have people that depend on generators to be able to function at home, people that are on nebulizers, things that are important to have power to. Do we want to starve off gasoline, or is this something that you're comfortable allowing? These are the kind of things, that's what I thought the study session was for. We're bringing forth these ideas and have that discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Over the past month or so, the city manager and I have had some loose dialogue with regards with state legislature, and doing their complete overhaul, putting little safeguards, giving us some better direction. And for the record, I think former Mayor Weir did an excellent job navigating a pandemic that nobody foreseen coming, that changed everybody's aspect on how we govern for that period of time. Completely weird and for all those reasons. But within that, I think there was some deficiencies that was shown that we can look and do a retool and set ourselves up for a better positioning for that. I think that's highly important moving forward. Heaven forbid that we go through this one more time. And I would like to have a much stronger footing, being able to take some actions that keep our citizens safe, but also keep as much as the noise and the outside influence coming from the county and some of the other areas where there was so much deficiencies coming from other agencies, that we can have a good firm footing. So I'd be in favor for moving this forward for a deep digest of it.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I also want to compliment Mayor Weir on her work during the pandemic. I actually went and got a pandemic test, and she was actually out there giving them. So not only did she govern from the dais, but she actually did work out there, and I think you spent it, many days out there. So thank you for your service to the city on that behalf, and that was well done. And my wife and I both went, I think 2 times at least, and you were there both times, so that showed that she was there a lot. So you're absolutely right in that regard. So thank you for bringing that up. And I agree with you, Councilmember. We've got to be in compliance with state law. And if a pandemic were to occur, Mr. Langford, next week, we would, regardless of our rules and what they are stating, that is a classic example of when state law would go into effect. I mean, it's the emergency powers of this legislature,
Right,
that they've established in 2021 do in fact restrict us and give us a smaller window with regards to operate.
That's
Is my
true.
interpretation of them.
Yes, that's true.
And so regardless of what our rules are at that point, we would have to follow state law, because that is in fact what state law has stated.
That's correct too.
Right. So in regards to state law and the comments earlier on the other discussion is, we can certainly go up to the limit of state law, but we can certainly make our own rules. If the state law says on this particular road it needs to be 35 miles an hour, and let's say it's a city road, and I know that's an analogy that doesn't work, but from a perspective of, we could have a lower speed limit in our city for our particular streets.
That's a very good analogy. Yes, that's what we can do.
And that's the point here. And I think Councilmember Steinmeier, you bring up an excellent point on looking at those. And so I think we're all in agreement. Is there any other further discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
Yeah, I agree with it as well. I mean, I didn't even realize how broad this was until it was emailed to me just a couple hours before the meeting. So I want to make sure we are staying in compliance with the Constitution. Not that I think it would ever happen here, but I also didn't think it would happen in New Mexico either, where an emergency order was issued and is, in my opinion, definitely in violation of the U.S. Constitution. So, yeah, I would like to see this move forward. And I will say, I do think the mayor should have some power, at least for temporary, to declare an emergency, because if we did have a situation arise, it may not be possible to get the city council together quickly enough, to do it, but definitely they would need to continue it beyond, 15, 30 days, something like that. That matches state statute. Thank you.
Nope. And we would certainly welcome your work, and Councilmember Steinmeier, your work on this issue. So,
I just have one more thing to say.
Please.
While it was a very confusing time, many mayors and many governors made very overreaching decisions, and I can remember one comment being made by a particular governor, I believe, that said really wasn't thinking about the Bill of Rights at that time. And I'm grateful that Mayor Weir and I were able to have discussions on balancing the health issues as well as the rights of every resident of Independence and the Missouri Bill of Rights. And so she did offer a tremendous leadership, lonely at the top time at a lot of points, but she did a good job. So I want to make sure that that the rights of our citizens are always first and foremost in any decision we make. That's the most important part. And so whatever emergency powers that we give to a government is always scary, a little unnerving, but I want to make sure we're being responsible with that.
Any other comments or questions regarding this issue? So what I'm hearing from this body is that we prepare a resolution for this body to then study the emergency powers of the mayor, if I'm hearing you correctly. Councilmember Steinmeier, if I just want to make sure I summarized your point.
No, that's fine.
Anything I missed, I want to make sure I'm clear.
Well, I think we've got a good starting point. I don't know where we go with this from forward. I guess city staff will work on wording and compliance with state statute. Is that how you understand how we're moving forward, Mr. Walker?
My understanding, so let's make sure we're clear, is that we would have a resolution directing me to review the Code of Ordinances relative to the emergency powers of the mayor. If the council were to adopt that resolution, then we would go look at those sections of city code and bring any recommendations that need to be made to get us in compliance with the new state law in effect. The only caveat I would like to make sure I add is I can do that for Section 11 of City Code. I lack the authority to make any changes to the section of the city charter that speaks to the mayor's emergency powers.
Then if you would like to work together on that, I would like to do that with you as well. And Councilmember Stewart, since he's taken that initiative as well.
So if assuming, I'm just laying this out, so assuming we get that direction tonight, the next step would be preparing a resolution to review emergency powers of the mayor. If that resolution passes, then we work on making city code compliant with state law.
Okay, I agree with that.
And
what about you, Councilmember Stewart?
May I add one last thing, just
Sure, please
to,
proceed.
and then I'll retract. But just given the confusion and feeling our way through these rules, the next meeting that would be available in compliance with Section 6.4 would be the October 1st meeting, since the September 18th agenda has been posted, and we are to have those agendas finalized 2 weeks in advance of the next meeting. I just want to make sure so there's no further confusion.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. Anyone else, other comments?
Sorry,
Would
Mr.
anybody
Mayor,
else? I'm sorry, go ahead.
One more thing.
Please.
Mr. Walker, you mentioned the charter. Do you know if the Charter Commission has reached that section of the charter yet?
They did. That was early on in Article 2 of the charter, but I confess at this moment I don't recall. There was a very verbose discussion around it because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but off the top of my head, I do not recall what their recommendation was. I can check and get back to the body on that.
If you don't mind, thank you.
I will.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to work with Councilmember Steinmeier and Councilmember Stewart on this matter to drive it forward? Because I think that's an excellent recommendation, and anyone else like to work on it? Okay. Councilmember, you'll kind of drive the buggy on that one and go forward, and then work with the city council, or city manager to come up with a recommendation. Anyone else? Okay. The second item on the agenda. And I took notes in my agenda, so please forgive me. Thank you. I've got it. The Arts Commission. Anyone here want to talk about the Arts Commission? And
Can I close this? Oh, thanks, Bob.
I can see better that way.
All right. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Good evening. Eileen Weir, 3600 Blue Ridge Boulevard, Independence, Missouri. I'm going to just provide a little history. I know there's lots of people here tonight who want to speak regarding the Mayor's Arts Commission. I was elected mayor in April of 2014, and in June 2014, the council voted to support the creation of the Mayor's Arts Commission. And over a period of time, that commission went through various changes and expansion as to what their role was in developing public art policy for the City of Independence, and also establishing a 1% for the arts program. Many of the members who served on that commission are here this evening, and as we all know, Independence has been an incredible leader in the arts. We are the only city in the metropolitan area that has arts zoning in our Englewood Arts District. We all have seen the success that is occurring in Englewood, on the square, and at places across our city that are benefiting from our commitment as a community to the arts. In August of 2021, the council voted to eliminate the Arts Commission, which left many of us questioning the status of the 1% for the arts funding program. In March, I sent a letter to the City Council. I also submitted a letter to our local paper, The Examiner. We received a letter of support from Dana Knapp, who's the president and CEO of Arts KC, asking the City Council to confirm their commitment to continuing the 1% for the arts program. In this email I received from the city manager, which I've also shared with this council over the last many months, this simply requires a confirmation that the council wishes to continue this program and assign an administrator for the program. With the elimination of the Arts Commission, we do not have any body to administer the program or to make the determination of what type of art may be qualified for this funding. The fund currently has no money in it, but one of the great projects that this community has achieved was the construction of the Uptown Market, and the sign, which I think all of us take great pride in, was funded through the 1% for the arts program. Probably the most clear example of a program like this is the new Kansas City Airport. Kansas City has a 1% for the arts program, which allowed for all the incredible artwork and design elements that we now see within the new Kansas City Airport. We have traveled to many cities around the region with our Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Council to visit cities who have seen incredible economic growth because of their support for the arts. This policy was enhanced after it was originally adopted. As we were developing our economic development policy, that was in conjunction with our EDC, which was then led by Tom Lesnick, and we included some extra provisions that any project that received public funding would also be subject to the 1% for the arts. But there is a provision which both North Point and Cargo Largo exercised that those benefits could also be achieved in other ways. So I just wanted to provide the public and the people here tonight with some background on this program, and what I would ask for is that the council reaffirm its commitment to this program and assign an administrator for that, which could be a city staff member, or it could be an outside agency, or it could be a citizens group, or any combination of any of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else here to speak? And please state your name and address, please.
I'm Stacy Short, 701 Proctor Place, Independence. I was the original chair for the Mayor's Advisory Commission to the Arts, and I have served through that whole period. I didn't actually come here to speak this evening because I didn't think you could speak during a study session, so I'm really not prepared, but I am totally prepared for the reestablishment of the Art Commission, because at the time that it was dissolved, we had the most, probably the most together group of volunteers that covered all of the areas that need to be addressed when you are in relationship to public art and to the art and cultural scene for any city, not just for a little area, but for the whole, across the board. So most successful cities have a local arts agency, whether it's managed by the city or managed independently. It's funded by the city, and it's the look-to for every answer that's related to the arts, whether it's architectural, visual arts, performing arts, anything related to the arts and culture in this city. And you can see the successes of cities our size and cities much smaller than ours who have an arts commission. So I think it's ridiculous that we don't, first of all, and I think it's just incredibly important to reestablish that as soon as possible. Does anybody have questions for me?
Any questions for Ms. Short? Please proceed.
Oddly enough, I do. Former council person mentioned to me that you were involved in a separate program involving the arts. Was there another?
A separate program?
Was there something else other than this Arts Commission? Was there?
Well, possibly. I'm a graduate from the Kansas City Art Institute, and I'm involved in a lot of different arts-related things. But if it's related to this commission, is that?
Was there another nonprofit that used to do arts related to this? Prior to this 1% for the arts, was there something else that?
Well, I was heavily involved with the establishment of Inglewood as an arts district and helped with Tom Scannell to write that ordinance.
Okay.
Is that maybe what it was?
I can't remember. I don't know. My COVID brain fails me sometimes.
You're always welcome to call.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for me?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, are we being asked to reaffirm the mayor's commission on arts? Is that what we're doing? Because I was under the impression that was being shifting gears into another committee. Understanding from the email that I've been reading, but I'd be more than happy to re-engage this idea and move that back forward.
So the commission was, at the time that the mayor, our new mayor took his role, the commission had come to the place where we felt we were a little encumbered by management, by an administrative body to be successful, fully successful in a broad, we've really grown as an art commission, and we were getting to be pretty successful and far-reaching, but we were limited by the city's administrative requirements, which is very logical and typical. So we were trying to consider and address a way to become independently separate and be the city's local art agency, which is one of the possible relationships that an art agency could have to be the city's art commission. So as we were going to explore that, we wanted to make sure that the new mayor was aware of our goal or our objective or where we were heading, and he hadn't had a lot of time in office yet when I was knocking on the door. So when I went to have that conversation with him, I was maybe a little surprised when that was on a Thursday, and just on the following Monday, the commission was dissolved on consent agenda. So I was totally taken by surprise because I hadn't had any warning of that, and was extremely disappointed. And then I also knew that it left the percent for arts program without a managing body, which it's written so that the commission is 100% responsible for those funds. And as an educated body, it was very appropriate. So yes, I'm asking that the Art Commission be reestablished, at least for the, excuse me, didn't expect to speak, for at least for the time being until we get to reestablish ourselves or arrange to establish ourselves separately or independently. So obviously the most logical is to immediately replace the Mayor's Advisory Commission to the Arts with those volunteers that were in place at the time and pick up where we left off and then move forward as we then choose and you all see fit. Any other questions?
Mr.
Go ahead.
I'm very much in favor to reestablish that. So the Independence Art Council, that is not a thing?
We don't have one. There is
Okay.
nothing.
Okay. Well, and I'm not trying to be combative, but with
Okay.
the email of transitioning, that is why that we voted to dissolve that, because it was asked by the commission that you were transitioning into this new role. But I'm very much in support of the arts, and we can work with that, and I'll be very much supportive of recommissioning the Committee for the Arts.
Well, just to be honest and clear, we were trying to have a conversation about moving forward, and we're definitely working from a different platform. So we were trying to share that we think it's a good idea to shift gears, but we didn't want to be thrown away. We weren't done.
No, and I echo your comments and happy to support it, and let's go forward and revisit this. So, and we would love for you to be involved in writing the policies and things like that, and have a collective approach to it. So I'd be happy to work with you on that if because you're the expert.
Thank you, and that commission has already created a lot of successful policy, but we couldn't implement it because of the structure of
Sure.
art and the city administration. So that's the part we kind of need to work through. So a lot of the work is done, and that was part of the reason we were very disappointed that all the work we did was going to be just gone.
Well, let's revisit it again. You've got my full support. Let's do that, and you know, let's meet as soon as this meeting is over, and start the discussion for that process from my perspective. And so then you can give us your recommendation, because you've got the experience, you've got the knowledge, you're the expert. How do we proceed, and how do we do this in the best way possible?
Thank you. Thanks very much.
You bet. Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
The 1%, I mean, there's no money in there. So I'm wondering, how do we see that the 1% begins to accumulate some funding? Arts is important to our community. I mean, Inglewood has done such great work in building this art district, and I want to continue to see it grow. I think just what they've done in the last couple of years is exciting. But Mr. Walker, if you could, when we put the resolution together, if you can come up with some funding ideas or ways to fund this 1%, that to me is important too. So not just putting together a committee, but having some funding to continue to grow that the arts community. Is that something we can look at or talk about?
Let me start by saying yes, I also am a big supporter of the arts, and I've tried to be very supportive of things going on, for example, in Inglewood. That said, our situation has not changed since I gave a budget presentation in May, that we are continually facing financial hardship. If we are going to fund this program, we should revisit the original resolution, which looked at those resources coming from new projects in the city and those being built into a project budget. It would be disingenuous of me to give you any kind of indication that we could use existing resources in the city to support that.
I appreciate that clarification. Mayor, Ware, did you have something?
I'm
as well?
sorry, I
Please
didn't
proceed.
plan on coming back up here again. The way the program is funded, which is the way it's funded in cities and in states who have adopted this program, is that it is essentially a fee or an excise tax that is applied to public construction programs. That does not include any infrastructure, it's not roads, it's not utilities. That's when the city built the farmer's market, that project qualified for the 1% for the arts, so an amount equivalent to 1% of that total project was then contributed to this fund. There were a lot of funding sources for that project, but that was one of them. The reason I feel this is so urgent for this council now is because this community is planning some pretty significant investments in public projects, fire stations. We know we need new police facilities, discussion of a general obligation bond, which may include, we expect some brick and mortar facilities, a new museum concept that's been discussed. And if this program is not in place, we are going to miss our opportunity to be able to capture this 1% that will enhance our economy and the appearance and safety of our city. Any questions?
No, that
So
was,
certainly we're not asking you to find money in the budget.
no, that is excellent, and that was my understanding for it. I'm so glad that you had made the clarification for everyone here but for everybody watching. So well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I understand. Please forgive me. Thank you, Mr. Baxley.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Rowland, Council. Michael Baxley, Executive Director, Inglewood Arts, 10901 East Winter Road. Should we move this up? Just to help inform the situation a little bit more, to put some numbers to this, I think people think about arts and they think about how it beautifies the area, but they forget about the bottom dollar. And so just to throw some numbers at you guys that could be helpful in your decision making, the gross domestic product regionally, the arts make up 3% of GPD regionally, which equate to about $6 billion. That's just here in the metro. If we look nationally, the GPD is 5% of that total gross domestic product, and it equates over $1 trillion. So this is a major industry. The other reason why it's so important to think about it as well is it's not an industry of chain big box stores. It's folks that live right here in Independence, that have businesses, that are artists working. So we're supporting our own folks with these programs and these initiatives. So it's big dollars, but it's dollars that go right back into our own folks. And so that's why it's so important. I wanted to share that with you all to consider when you're weighing and making these important decisions, that you're investing in your own people. And so a lot of folks think about art and they just think, oh, well, that makes it pretty, but it's also a big industry. And so I just wanted to point that out. So I want to thank the commission too and the volunteers that came tonight that also put a lot of work into this to get us to this point. So I'd encourage the mayor and the council to really take a critical look. And I don't want to oversell it. You guys already said yes, so thank you.
No, and I also want to say the work that you have done as executive director has been extraordinary, and the progress you've made and the buildings you've built, I just cannot say enough good things about what you all have done in the Inglewood Arts District. So very, very good, and keep up the great work. And I know it's a team effort, and you've done a great job with your board and with everyone being a great team to move that forward. So I can't say enough good things. So thank you for your work. Anyone else? Then Councilmember Steinmeier, just to summarize, just a resolution to move this forward and have this discussion, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, I think that what has been raised, the reaffirmation of the commitment of the city towards the Arts Commission, and that we do assign someone to administer it is important. I think that needs to be included in the resolution. And any other input should be emailed to council to ensure that the language gets put in there that's important to you, that we can then discuss as we move forward. So I thank you all for taking the time to come. I can tell you that there are a lot of little Texas towns my daughter took me to when she lived down there that was absolutely saved by the arts. And so it's huge, it's important. So thank you for it, and I look forward to hearing more information from you all.
Okay, excellent. The next item on the agenda is the discussion. Mr. Steinmeier, please proceed.
Ms. Rowland, Mayor Rowland, I appreciate the apologies that you gave tonight. I think those were important. I know that while some may not have said anything directly to you, believe me when I say that some comments were made to me, and maybe it was uncomfortable to say anything. I think we have someone who wants to comment as well, so I'll go ahead and turn it over, and then we can continue to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of the council. Eileen Weir, 3600 Blue Ridge Boulevard, Independence, Missouri. I want to first address the issue regarding the Independence Health Department. This has been a topic of a lot of discussion and, frankly, confusion and misinformation over the last several years. So, Mayor, I appreciate your acknowledgement that some of your comments may have been inaccurate, but I do want for the public record to share some information about what did occur in the council's decision regarding the health department in 2017. So the health department was created by two different sources, one being the city charter and also the local public health agency assignment by the Missouri Department of Health. And those occurred approximately concurrently in 1978. In 2018, the council was faced, as you are now, with some difficult budgetary decisions. We had a significant issue with crime in our city, and we needed to find a way to create some funding for the police. In order to do that, we asked the city manager to look for some different efficiencies. This was part of our Independence for All strategic plan to find efficiencies in our departments across the city. The determination was reached by the city manager, which he recommended to the council, was to eliminate the redundant services of the Independence Health Department and the Jackson County Health Department. Our buildings were literally. Decision followed after many months of meetings with department staff and the city council that we would decentralize operations of the health department. We are required to have a health director per charter, so the health department was never dissolved. We didn't have the authority, as the city manager said earlier, to overrule the charter. We continue to have a health director. We continue to provide many health services, including animal services, but the standalone health department, those services were split among departments, and the cost of those services was shared among various departments across the city. This did not meet the expectations of the state of Missouri, which has very specific requirements of what you need to do to be considered a local public health agency, or LPHA, as we say. With those funds, we were able to fund the street crimes unit for the Independence Police Department, and I think that Chief Dustman would say that unit has been an incredible success for the city in reducing crime and being more responsive to our citizens. That would not have been possible had the city manager not brought forward this recommendation to change some of those funding sources. Then 2019 happened, and we were faced with a global pandemic. Because we are not a local public health authority, we did not have the ability to make our own rules regarding the pandemic. In the conversation earlier regarding emergency powers, those powers were assigned to me, and I was directed by the council, get our health department back. Plain and simple, let us know when it's done. So we worked very hard with our 2 lobbying firms that we retained at the time and our representatives in Jefferson City, and what I would call a true miracle, were able to regain designation as a local public health authority in, I believe it was January of 2020, and were able to make our own rules for how we were going to respond to the global pandemic. These actions were not brought forward by the council. They certainly were not brought forward by a single council member. They were brought forward by the city manager under the authority that was vested in him by the city charter and the code of ordinances as a recommendation for a change in the table of organization and a change in the budget. So we're, now recognized as a local public health authority. If that decision, if we had known that there was going to be a global pandemic, we may not have made that decision at the time. But the public safety needs of our community were urgent, and I would say continue to be a top priority for this city. The action that was taken in February 2018 saved $375,000 to the general fund. With that money, we were able to allocate $340,000 and add 5 new police officers to create what I referenced earlier, the street crime unit in the police department. The city manager also recommended that a portion of the savings be redirected to create 2 new positions in the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department to focus on community and employee wellness, and we were never asked to vote on the restructuring of the health department as the council. We approved a budget and we approved the table of organization. I think that was the right decision at the time, and when we had the opportunity to restore what the state isn't very creative or imaginative. I know those of you who have spent time down there, but we were able to meet the criteria to be recognized as an LPHA and receive state funding and our own authority under that designation. On the other topic included in this agenda item, I did reach out to several council members regarding the analogy that was used, which I thought was confusing regarding a woman's ability to purchase property without her husband's permission. And I don't think that that was what was intended, but it was certainly offensive to me as a woman. It was, I think, offensive to many people who live in this community regardless of their gender, and I appreciate those who I did talk to for your support in my position on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on any of these items? Councilmember, how would you like to proceed?
Sorry. I appreciate what you've said tonight. I think it would go a long way. Mr. Mayor, if you would, at the next council meeting, extend that to those who don't normally pay attention to the study session. I think that setting the record straight, I know the intent wasn't to degrade or to insult. That wasn't it. But, since we're in the throes of ethics discussions and whatnot, I wanted to make sure that we have the opportunity to safeguard people who have been elected. This is a difficult job. and to sit in your chair, to sit in the same chair that Mayor Weir sat in, and the difficult decisions that the council had to walk through during some very dark times was real, and there were a lot of emotions. There was a lot of difficulty in just trying to figure out what was the best measure. And the last thing I want is to someone to feel like their efforts or their legacy is being torn at. And I know that wasn't the intent, but if someone hears that and is harmed by that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to make that right. It's not to embarrass, it's just to do simply that. Make it right. And I think what you said tonight was wonderful. I'm grateful for that, and I would ask that you would extend that and maybe repeat yourself to those who will be in attendance and listening to the council meeting, if that is something that you would agree to.
Absolutely. Be happy to do it.
I would like for that to happen.
If you would like me to read them again, I'd be happy to do it right now.
No, I'm saying in the next council meeting, in the formal council meeting, if you would be okay. We don't have to do it as a resolution. If you would tell us that you'll repeat what was said tonight.
Absolutely.
I think that would go a long way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
so I know all of us have probably said stuff from the dais that we wish we could take that back, and that's probably the situation you were in. No, I just want to say I do appreciate, I received a couple of phone calls as well about it, and I'll be honest, I didn't catch it the first time, but I had to rewatch it today, and I'm like, yeah, probably not a good idea. Anyway, so I do appreciate your apology. Probably a week late, but, I do appreciate it anyway. So, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
I don't know what Councilmember Stewart's talking about. I've never said anything I shouldn't have said up here.
I actually thought about bringing you up.
Never left my mic on.
I second that.
Nothing.
Thank you. I've got another statement, and I've actually got two statements, and in just remembrance of 9/11. And to have some comments about that, and then I'm going to finish with comments that were sent to the mayor's office from a sixth grader about their thoughts on September 11th. So I think that'd be very important for us to do that and conclude the meeting tonight on that. Today, as we reflect on the tragic events of September 11th, we not only reflect on the day that forever changed our nation, but also on the days that followed. A testament to the resilience, unity, and unwavering spirit of our nation. 20 years ago, our world was shaken to its core as the twin towers of the World Trade Center crumbled. The Pentagon was attacked. Flight 93 heroically met its end in a Pennsylvania field. The loss of innocent lives, the destruction of iconic landmarks, and the sheer horror of that day are etched into our collective memory. We will never forget the pain and sorrow that descended upon our nation on that day. As we remember that fateful day, let us also reflect on the aftermath, the day after, and the days that followed. It was a time when our nation came together as one, united by a common purpose, an unwavering commitment to freedom, democracy, and the desire to protect the lives that we love. In the wake of the September 11th attacks, something remarkable happened. We became more individuals, we became a united force, bound by a shared sense of grief, but also determination. In the midst of unspeakable tragedy, we discovered the strength of our national character, the true spirit of America. On the day after, something incredible occurred. You couldn't buy a flag because patriotism was everywhere. American flags adorned homes, businesses, and car windows. They were symbols of unity, of our resilience, and on our wavering resolve to stand up against terror. As I traveled the country, I would pass bridges on highways and interstates adorned with American flags, sometimes with crowds on top of them waving the American flag. But it just wasn't the flags that we displayed. It was the acts of kindness, of solidarity, and of service. Firefighters, police officers, first responders, and countless volunteers rushed to the scene to help their fellow Americans of need. 343 died that day. We witnessed the extraordinary acts of heroism, compassion, and selflessness. In the days that followed, we overcame our differences. Political affiliations, backgrounds, and beliefs took a backseat to our shared identity as Americans. We held vigils, we came together in prayer, and offered our support to those who lost loved ones in this event. We found comfort in one another's company and solace in the collective strength of our nation. In the midst of darkness, a sense of unity and purpose illuminated our path forward. We were resolute in our determination to stand up to those who sought to tear us apart. We rebuilt what was destroyed, but we also rebuilt our spirit, our unity, and our belief in the American dream. Today, 2 decades ago, as we remember the events of 9/11 and the remarkable unity that followed, let us not only honor the memory of those lost, but also rekindle the spirit of unity that defined that response. Let us recognize the strength of our nation lies not in just our resilience, but our capacity to come together as one people, one nation, and one United States of America. And I just want to share, the sixth grader did not share their name. I would love to say their first name in their school if they would like to do that. But this sixth grader wrote this: September 11th, I will never forget. The people's faces were full of fright. To see the two towers come tumbling down on that day. The Pentagon was the same. No one could talk about it that day. Heroes sacrificed their lives for others, for children, for fathers, and for mothers. Many lives were lost that day. But when I pray, I thank the Lord for my family and that they are okay. But for others who are now single fathers and mothers, I pray for those days that go by because I know their family members are now high in the sky. God bless America and everyone in it. And with that, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.